We were having technical difficulties. So let's see if anybody hops on. Now that we're several attempts into this, let's see. Whew, man, it was being kind of ridiculous to me for a little bit there. So YouTube has a few new settings that I am not used to when it comes to live streams. But the cool thing is, moving forward after this live stream, I should be able to live stream horizontal instead of vertical. So the next live stream that we do, it won't be like this, it will be horizontal, so you can watch me on a TV, computer screen, whatever you want. But hey, what's up, Duck? What's up, Coulter? What's up, Bob? What's up, Stray? How y'all doing? Forge is nice and hot. It's been going for a minute while I've been doing this. What we're going to work with today, this little piece right here, 5 inches on the longest point by 1.25 inches. We are going to make a full tang steak knife for myself. And I'm going to make a one that I think makes sense profile-wise for what I'm going to like. I'm going to start off by heating up backside, and I'm going to isolate what's going to be the handle material. And then I'll get the handle section kind of just moved out a little bit, and then I'll forge out the blade, do the handle. Y'all see me do that several times. But it's a spicy one today. I think outside, if my wife is on the computer, she could tell you how hot it is outside. But it's probably going to get up to about 120 in the shop while I'm doing this. Watching from Argentina. Awesome. Nice to have you here, Christian. I'm going to be drinking lots of water because just dealing with getting the video started, I'm already sweating. So it's a spicy one in here. And just like last time I did the live stream, it's been a long day so far. I got up for work about 4 a.m., went and worked almost 12 hours, got off, ate dinner, came out here, lit up the forge. So that's what we're doing right now. Modern art is a CIA psyop. It shouldn't take long for this to warm up. This is 3/16 of an inch ADC RV2. And the section we're going to be working with is only going to be, it's like 1.25 inches wide. So it's not going to take long to heat up. I'm going to be doing full brute to forge on this. I'm going to get it as close to forge to finish as possible, because you might be thinking to yourself, Eric, a steak knife is not that complicated. But I'm going to do a nice profile, and I'm going to do it as close to forge to finish as possible. so that I have myself again, as close to forge to finish chef's or steak knife as I can. That's going to be a fun, just good looking profile. So I think it's going to be pretty cool. You know, one of the best parts about being a bladesmith is to be able to make stuff like this for yourself. I'm going to be using probably these 3 hammers during this whole process. So the Two Bastards rounding hammer, we're going to use that one during this forging process. We're going to use the Two Bastards cross peen, straight peen, and of course my Two Bastards dog head. I'll start with the dog head. Primary reason why we're going to be using the rounding hammer is just the round side. We don't really need the flat side. And that's going to be when we start working on our bevels as part of it. We're going to start off with our dog head. And we're going to create the transition between the heel of the blade and the handle. I would love to tell you that that's Mrs. Rivers, but it's most likely Toby if he says I'm back in all caps. My middle child. Can you suggest then that I actually stayed for it? Heck yeah. Well, we're about to start forging, so make sure you hang out. Do you have the last work you did? And the last. So I don't think that I. Yes. So this was the last one that we did. It's just a chef's knife. And I've already got the profile drawn on it that I'm going to be going with. And I've got another little profile drawn on the back side. But I've got that. I've got one of the little blacksmith knives that we forged on a live stream where we did the twists on the handle there in a few different directions. So that was one of the ones that we did on one of the live streams. Now, of course, we're about to start forging on this one. Like I said, I'm going to create the transition between the heel and what's going to be the handle. Hang it off the edge. That's me about enough material right there, easily for a handle. So that creates that transition between this right here is going to be our cutting edge, and the rest of this is going to be our handle material. Go ahead and planish out that spine area. So I'm going to take the fan, pull it down a little bit and not point it at the forge. I have the fan blowing some cool air in here, some nice, crisp, cool 105-degree wind into the shop. Because at least the over 100-degree weather outside is cooler than the 100 and probably like 15 that it is inside here. The tab is crooked. First of all, the tab is not crooked on the blacksmith knife. It makes you think that it's crooked because of the twist that's right here, but it is not crooked. It is centered inside there, and it is straight. Mister, it's crooked. It ain't crooked. The twist that goes right into that little tab, which is like the guard, makes it look like it is, but it's not. After a very long run of non-stop work, and heck yeah, especially whenever you are doing your farm stuff plus your regular job. If y'all don't know who Steve Jennings is, he's the guy that made my power hammer that's over here. that right there, again, just refining that heel transition. This right here is going to end up being the ricasso area, and that's going to be the handle material. Just do a little bit of planishing as we go. The goal here is to get the handle about 60% profiled before we go in to start working on the blade profile. Once we do the blade profile to about 75%, then we go back to the handle, do a little bit more refining, we go back to the blade, back to the handle, back to the blade. It's the way that I like to do it, especially on a forge to finish knife, because we're doing about 90% of the work in the forging process as opposed to grinding it. Taking out the hammers. The nice thing is, as we get more heat into the blade, it's going to heat up a lot faster and stay hotter longer. So we have my son on Nisha Rivers' account and my wife on the Rivers Experience account talking to y'all. So just in case anybody who just hopped on is wondering what we're forging tonight, we are forging a full tang steak knife. Now, of course, this is a forge to finish version of that. So we're basically forging the bevels all the way down to the cutting edge. We are not going to have hardly any grinding on this blade when it's all said and done. So we're going to do pretty much everything with hammer and anvil. I want that area right there to be about 1 inch wide. One of the things that you'll have to remember is whenever we go through and we planish, if you look right now, you can see this little area that's darker, this lighter area. That darker area is whiter. It's flared out. You see how it has a flare to it right there? We want to push that back in. And what that does, when we push that back in, is it opens this section that we just forged down just a little bit. So I want that to be about 1 inch, and then start profiling the rest of the tang there. The whole point behind that is it gives me roughly the size that I want it to be going into the handle, and it gives me a little bit of meat to play with later if I need to forge the profile slightly different. You don't want to take it all the way down to its final size this early in the process, because you're not going to have the material to be able to fix things later. And again, anybody who just hopped on, we are forging a forge to finish chef's knife. I want to call it a chef's knife, but it's going to be a steak knife. I'm going to use it as a steak knife, but it'll be a knife that is fully forged. So whenever it's all said and done, there's going to be a forged finish all the way to the cutting edge. Now, one of the things that I was going to tell y'all on the last live stream where we did the chef's knife, one of the tricks to get a nice brute to forge finish and it not be super deep on something like a chef's knife is to not clean off your forge scale as you go. Because what ends up happening is the forge scale puts a very shallow dent into the blade. So as you're forging it, you'll get all this cool texture, but it's only as deep as the forge scale, which is thinner than a hair. So you get all the cool texture without having super deep indentions. So I'm going to show you on this. You can see this forge scale. It's the shinier part that's right here, and where there's no forge scale, it gives you all of the cool texture whenever you clean off all that forge scale without having crazy huge dents in there that are going to grab food. All right, let's grab this back out and keep forward. So what we have here is the initial profile for this handle. We've got what's going to be the swell in the belly of the handle. We've got what's going to be the little, what I call pinky choil, the little curve at the back that's going to drop down and grab your hand. I'll give you a better close-up of a blade that has something like that. So, a blade like this little section right here is what I call the pinky choil, because we call this a finger choil, because for your index finger to not slide up onto the blade. This is the one for your pinky. We're going to create one of those. We need that extra piece, that bulk in that heel, that butt of that tang, to be able to have that. Get you all pizza? Yeah, I'll have to send it to you. So that's what we're working on right now. Like I said, we're going to get the handle about 60% finished before we end up going and switching to the blade side. So we've only got about maybe 2 more heats working on the handle part. Then we're going to switch to the blade, get that profile all forged, get bevels forged in, all that stuff. I'll tell you, even though summer pretty much just started here, I'm already ready for fall. It's too hot out here. All right. Keep working on that heel. So you see here, we have that curve down. Now, of course, this is rather small, but that's because we're going to end up stretching it out. The goal is for that area that you see right there to fit this step down right here across my anvil. Because that is the size of my fist. But because we're going to be doing a tapered tang, we're going to get a lot of length out of this as we forge it out. We're going to do one last heat on this to just refine that just a little bit. And then, like I said, we're going to be forging in a distal taper on the tang. And that way we get all the length we want, the size we want. We get a nice light tang. Even though it's a full tang, it won't weigh a ton, which is nice for a steak knife. Any British folks in here? Woo! I am already like sweating up a storm here. You know, whew. But it's nice. One thing about the heat, which is nice when it comes to forging, is it takes almost no time for the blade to heat back up because it doesn't lose a lot of heat. One of the things I want to tell y'all is whenever y'all see me forging, sometimes it'll seem like the steel is colder than it is, because my lights in my shop make the steel look colder. But typically it's a lot hotter than you think it is. At least when it gets down to that kind of gray color. there is our rough profile on our tang, with it being a lot smaller. So as you can see here, you see how you still see that it's glowing a little bit versus down here where it's just gray. Up there it's still kind of red. Down here on my anvil it looks really cold, but it is still really hot. But that is all we're doing to the tang right now. That tang is going to grow as we start forging in that distal, but we're not going to screw with that yet. We're going to get our blade roughly profiled, and then we'll go and start worrying about our tang. Because forging in a distal taper doesn't abuse the steel that much. We're not going to be doing a ton of crazy profiling. We already did that. The reason why I like forging the handle profile first before going into the blade is because it puts a lot of abuse on the profile whenever you're forging in all of those angles and curves. If you do your blade and then you forge in your handle and you have that blade really thin, it's going to do all kinds of crazy things to your blade that you're going to have to fix as you go. I don't want to have to do that. Get the handle roughly profiled, get all that abuse out of the way, and then focus on your blade, get it to where you need it to be, and you can do fine tuning on your tang. A pair of tomahawk tongs. So I'm going to have to look and see what tomahawk tongs are. That's a great question, Doug. What is everybody working on right now? I'm working on some back sweat. Goodness. I'm going to have to open this shop door or something because it is like, my phone is super hot right now. I've got a wet washcloth behind it now. I'm hoping that'll actually help it. Y'all work with me here. Like I said, it's super hot. Some people might think that I'm joking around whenever how hot it is in my shop, or might think that I'm over exaggerating, but I'm not. It is super hot in the shop. There we go. It's no joke. Whenever your phone overheats that fast. Anyways, we probably lost a few people during that, but it is what it is. We're back. I've got a much colder piece of material behind my phone now. Get some water-cooled quench plates or whatever. We're going to work on this blade profile. Miss Rivers is out here. We'll see what she's got going on. Okay. So she's trying to do this without it affecting too much. So that right there, we forged down this top section right here to get rid of that 45-degree angle that we had there. We're going to end up elongating this as we go. But I'm going to bring that down just a little bit narrower to the tip.
It's currently 98 degrees bushel balls with a little bit of humidity in it.
What does it say that the heat index is?
It's 100 degrees.
Whew. There we go. I'm thinking that that's going to make a lot of difference right there. Whew. Okay, I'm going to shut this door a little bit. Okay. Just a little bit. There we go. So again, what are y'all working on right now? Let's see if I can go through here. Go bake a pizza Toby. Need tongs meant for holding tomahawks. Okay, that makes sense. "8 degrees where I am. Jealous that it looks 8 degrees. Where are you at that it's 8 degrees? Is that Celsius or Fahrenheit? I'd be kind of interested to know which one that is. That it's 8 degrees. Eight degrees. Jeez. Living like the Antarctic? Oh, I guess that makes sense. Okay, this blade's going to grow quite a bit as we forge. So we got a nice taper to that tip. Oh, and Celsius, yeah. So what's going to happen is, as I forge in the bevels and the distal taper to the tip, we're going to get about another inch of length out of this blade. And then we're going to get about another inch of length out of the handle. So overall, we should end up with, I don't have my small ruler in here, so let's use this giant son of a gun. Right now, we're at 7.5 inches. So to give you an idea, we started with 5 inches. We've already grown 2.5 inches. So from 5 inches to 7.5 overall length on this. So y'all can see it. Seven and a half overall inches. We'll probably get to about 9.5 inches overall length when it's all said and done. So because it's going to be a forge to finish knife, like I said, we're forging the bevels, we're forging everything as close to finish as possible. 46 degrees though is still cold. And yes, Australia. So my wife was giving me the knowledge bombs on where that probably was, because she is a lot smarter than I am. That's not just me being nice to her. She is a lot smarter than I am. Ooh. That's only going to take a couple of seconds to warm up. Get myself another bottle of water. So where's everybody from that's in the chat section right now? Where are y'all from? That's one of the things that I like to know. I think it's cool seeing all the different people from all the different places. So Maryland, Eastern Pennsylvania, Colorado. I know where you're from, Steve. And like I said, Steve Jennings is the guy who made my power hammer right here. So this wonderful, beautiful tool right here, he's the one that made that and brought it to me right before Blade Show, Texas. East Tennessee, Bali, Indonesia, awesome. Ohio, Brazil, what's up? Woo. get this out and start forging this blade. All we did initially was done a little bit of preform. Right now, with my dog head, I'm going to go ahead and stretch it out just a little bit. All I did there was a little preformed distal taper. So brought it down just a little bit to the tip before we start forging in the bevels. That way we already have it distilled a little bit. So make forging the bevels a little bit easier. And that probably gave me, just by itself, about another ½ an inch or more in length, so it's not bad. Whew. So definitely not too shabby when it comes to use this little towel that she gave me to wipe the sweat off my face. So you forge in that distal taper. Antarctica. Jeez. North Africa. Algeria. Nice. So whenever you forge in that distal, before you start forging in your bevels, you're going to get that distal already started, so you're not just relying on your bevels to forge it in. Thought of if you switch over to landscape view, live streams. I didn't think about that. That's a good point. But we'll try it out. We'll just see how it goes. You know, if we get less for that one, then we get less. Just kind of go from there. Okay, we're going to switch to the round side of the rounding hammer and go in towards our cutting edge. All I did there was I just forged on the bottom about third of the blade on both sides there and kind of did a bevel preform. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this heel out with a straight peen cross peen, but I wanted to go ahead and get this little section already kind of distal tapered to the heel of it before I start drawing out the heel with the straight peen cross peen. Now, when it boils down to it, some of the processes that I do with forging, I do them because that's the way that I taught myself how to do it. So it is probably not something that a mastersmith would do process-wise, but for me, I like to do a lot of these like pre-form things with a lot of the stuff that I do. I want to pre-work on the distal before I forge in the bevels. I want to kind of pre-pull down and thin out that edge before I start pulling the material down to that area. The whole point behind that is I get those big hammer blows to pinch that area. I get the edge thinned out a little bit, and then I use the rest of the material that I have above that to stretch everything down. But I've already kind of gave it a little bit of an edge. Now I know I have all that meat in the center of it that I can just put wherever the heck I want. I've already kind of set up the edge. Now everything else is just material for me to play with. So we're going to use the 2-bastard straight peen, cross peen. We're going to use the straight peen side, and we're going to pull the heel down. We're going to stretch it out this way and then stretch it out this way. So we're going to work on pulling that material down towards the cutting edge. Get a little bit of height out of this blade. Is height necessary for a steak knife? No, but I think it's going to look cool. So we were able to just get after it with that, flatten it out. Now, of course, stuff's going to get moved and shifted and all that. Not super worried about this section because of something I'm going to show you in a little bit. But went ahead. You can see all these lines going this way. That's because we're pulling the material this way. When we flatten all this out, that material is going to just expand. So we were able to do that. Both sides. You don't want to just do it on one side. You want to do it to both sides of the blade. The reason behind that is you'll end up moving the material too far one side and then you'll have to fix it. Or you'll create a dish on one side, and then what will happen is as you're forging the bevels in, you'll slightly be creating a hump on one side, so a convex and a concave, and you'll just be shifting it over like that whenever you're doing it, when you're trying to get those bevels nice and even, because you don't realize that that center area is so much thinner than your spine. So when you forge on one side, that spine's so thick that it will just curve. And then you go to forge on the other side and it'll just curve this way while it's trying to be even with that spine. As we bend this out, again, it's just going to be able to get hot quicker. Woo! It is just hot. This is one of those things where when you watch Forged in Fire, you know, even though some people might not like the show, some people might like the show, they have like 4 forges going in that space at one time. Like that must be brutal. Overseas Restoration Channel. Finish forging. True. See, and that's one of the things that I don't want to have happen. Is I don't want to forge something and then have to grind away everything to get to some profile. Like I want to forge this and call it good. Let's say on my little project that we did here, I'm only grinding this little section and just a little bit off the tip here. That's it. So my profile is where I wanted it, to the heel and all that. I'm just grinding a little bit and a little bit. That's it. If I only have to grind off about a 1/16 of an inch, I feel like I did myself justice. Just going to do a little bit more drawing out. Okay, we're able to get that hill brought down to where I want it. So let's see how big that is. We started with 1.25 inches. We can use my smaller ruler for this. So we started out with 1.25 inches. Right now we are at 1.75 inches tall. So we've drawn it out 1/2 inch in height. And it's still going to get slightly more than that as we start flattening it and smoothing out those bevels. What's up, Craig? How you doing? What's up, Randy? Yeah, I just turned 40. Miss Rivers is letting you know that. Your old 40th birthday. I'm out here in the shop, sweating my butt off, forging a knife. Thank you, Duck. Thank you, Randy. So, how many people who are watching this right now don't make knives? You're just watching this because you happen to scrolling through your feed and you saw someone doing something like this and you decided to stop and watch it. I know there was probably quite a bit more when we had like 90 people or 100 something people watching, but I'm always interested to know how many people are just here because they're like, oh, that kind of looks cool. Doghead hammer, cleaning up the bevels. Sweating up a storm. So, rough blade profile, roughly straightened. Of course, we're not at that full planishing phase right now. We got our distal on there, blade profile, hill drop down, bevels forged in. We're not really going to work on finishing that blade until we get the handle where we want it to be, and then we're going to do the rest of the work because we're only about 70% done with the blade right now. We're not going to go too crazy with it until we actually get the handle exactly where we want it. So now we'll switch back and grab the tip. Now look at how tiny that little handle is right now. So the handle, before we even start forging it out, right now from the butt of it to the finger choil, we're at 3¼ inches. So 3¼ inches long. We're going to see how far we can get that to stretch out. So to give you an idea of what my goal length for the handle is, wipe my face before I get sweat all over my glasses. So my overall length, or my goal for the actual, and yes, I do make knives. Oh, that was a pole. Look at you. So with the handle where my hand goes inside of it right here, so this section right here, you can see this is a little bit longer, so that you can hold it like this, or you can wear gloves and hold it. But I only want about 4 inches of length with this to about 4.5 inches. So my goal is about 4.5 inches long on the handle. If it's slightly longer than that, I'm cool with that. But that is 4.5 inches on the inside. So from the heel from the front of the finger choil where the heel is to the pinky choil, about 4.5 inches. Right now, the whole entire handle from heel to the butt of it, the whole handle is only 3.25. Between 3.25 and 3.5. So we've got a lot of material to move, and we're going to get all of that by forging in the distal taper. Not used to people doing holes on here. I've been pulling his punches with content recently. Yeah, he really is. I try and tell people to go and watch his channel as much as possible. Very underrated channel. I really wish more people would go and watch him. Okay. So for the handle, we're going to stretch it out first before we do any other profiling. We're going to use the straight peen side of the straight peen cross peen and come across it. Really focusing on the end of it. At this point, you should not be hitting your ricasso area at all with this, because you want that to be the widest part of this distal taper. Both the taper going into the tip and the taper going into the heel of the butt of the handle. Right now, we're at 3 3/4. So we're already at 3 3/4 overall length versus about 3 1/4, which is not too bad. So what's up, babe? What happened? I see 30 people have responded to it, but that's about it. That's the first time I've ever seen a poll on here, so we're trying new things. So again, for the people who just joined, we are forging essentially a steak knife. It's just a way that a bladesmith would make one, not something you would get from like Walmart or something like that. This is an actual like forged to finish knife, which is pretty cool. If you don't know what forged to finish means, it means we're forging pretty much to the finished shape, the bevels, all of that stuff. So all you do is you just sharpen it, eat with it. Right now we're working on the handle. I'm stretching that out a little bit. Okay, we've got about as much distal taper with that particular hammer that I want to do. Now we need to flatten it. But I know that I want that intersection to be as wide as the step down that we have on the front of the anvil, because that's as wide as my hand. We're about 1/2 inch away from that. we'll get all of that during the next couple of steps with the dog head. Now, for all of y'all that are still here watching, most of y'all probably watch a lot. Remember, these live streams are sponsored by Two Bastards, Texas Smithy & Supply. They've been making stuff like this, like hammers and everything like that, for 6 years and selling them. They don't just make the hammers, they also do restorations from ancient, old school hammers. They do swage blocks, they do all kinds of stuff. So I have their information on all of my videos. You can call them and say, hey, what's up? I need a hammer, and you give me some advice on what I should get, and they will hook you up. Frank and Nita, Two Bastards. They're the ones. Of course, my shirt is probably really sweaty. It's one of their shirts. But yeah, they're absolutely awesome. They're just really cool people, and I love them in person. Just to be able to talk to them all the time. There's not many companies that you can go and support that have people that you can just talk to like that. Taking some of those big hammer blows from that straight bean out of here. Planish the handle up into the ricasso. Okay, now that we have a rough distal on there, I want to go ahead and fine tune that profile. And we'll get all of the rest of the size and length out of this phase. We got a rough distal taper in there, but I need to go ahead and get that profile to where it needs to be before we finish the distal, because by default, whenever I'm hammering and forging to get that profile, we need to make sure that we still have room to clean things up and areas to planish. The reason why you don't want to fully forge your profile on the handle before doing the distal is because when you do the distal, it blows everything up. It is like increasing the handle by 10% in some areas and like 50% in others. Because whenever you're forging it out, you start lengthening things. So if you have a cool profile, by the end of it, it's going to look like a big bulky version of that because you're expanding all of that steel. So you want to get rough profile on your handle, then do a simple distal taper to get most of that distal forged in, and then finish doing your profile and your distal at the same time. If you do one step completely before you do the other, you're going to end up screwing it up. Some of these things need to be done in steps, and if no one teaches you or tells you that you need to do it in steps, first one you're going to do, you're going to forge that profile completely, then you're going to try and distal it out, and you're going to go, why does this look absolutely ridiculous? And it's because you expanded all that material after you made your profile. And then you're going to have to grind it all away and get rid of all that material. You don't want to do that. Keep as much material as you can in the knife. Again, I wasn't taught any of these things. I just figure it out. What I'm doing is I'm holding the blade off the edge of the anvil, and I am hammering in on the butt of it, and it's pulling this area back and giving me a nice round profile in there. Giving me a nice round profile. What's going to end up happening with that big paddle looking area on the back is I'm going to end up triangulating it more and actually making a really cool profile. Well, you know I love seeing that, Steve. I'm happy that I've been able to help you out. What's up, OG Franchi? What are you doing? Everybody, go follow his channel. If you're subscribed to me and you're not subscribed to the OG Franchi, you're missing out on a really good channel. And let me tell you something. If you've thought about getting one of those Grizzly 2x42s and you're not watching his channel, you're absolutely missing out, because he does a lot of the work on the Grizzly 2x42. You know, the one that costs like $200 and something on sale. If you're not following him or subscribed to him, I don't know what you're doing. You should definitely go subscribe to him. All right. Keep working on that. Like I said, bring it down. What's going to end up happening is I'm going to end up pinching this a little bit, and I'm going to narrow this section here, and it's going to make a nice swell to the backside. Is that necessary on this type of knife? Absolutely not, but you know what? I'm a bladesmith, and I can make my knives whatever profile I want because I'm the one working on it. That's the benefit to making your own knives versus buying them from Walmart. Dirty thunderstorm. Let's see here. Is it dangerous to be washing dishes during a thunderstorm? You know how much I wish it was thunderstorming here right now? If it was about 80 degrees outside, woo! Man, I would settle for 80 degrees. The nice thing is, whenever I go inside my house, it doesn't matter what temperature it is, it's going to feel like an ice box compared to all this stuff right here. So a lot of the stuff that we're focusing on right now is the refining process, the beautification process. Really starting to make it look like a cool knife. Distal back in there. So we have that kind of profile right there. I'm going to keep messing with it. What's going to be nice here is whenever this is all said and done, what's going to happen is between that heel to finger choil to swell to pinky choil, it's going to just wrap around my hand. It's going to have a really cool profile, because what's going to happen is the butt of that tang is going to get pulled down to where the bottom of that's even with the heel of the blade, at least roughly. And again, this is a steak knife, it's not a chef's knife, so I don't need to have to worry about the bottom of the handle being a certain amount of like height away from the heel, because I'm not trying to like chop veggies with this. I'm going to be cutting steaks with it. I'll be able to cut veggies with it, no issue, but the goal here is to cut steaks. Make sure you're still focusing on your distal taper as you're doing this. I think that's going to work well with this, and then I'll be able to clean up that profile a little bit whenever I finish the profile. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start working on the main body of the handle. So we're going to start working on this section right here, getting that profile to where I want it, and then we're going to end up bringing this handle down a little bit. Now that could easily be a steak knife, how it is, right there, and that'll probably be another one of my little kitchen knives. But that one's not a force to finish one. That's one that I'm going to end up cleaning up. 60 to 39%. Nice. And yes, Danny, it is super hot here. I've got a wet washcloth and an ice pack behind my phone to keep it from overheating, because we've already overheated once. It's hot enough to overheat my phone in here. And of course, you can see I'm sweating like an old saying, you know what, in church. Misha's watching right now. She's probably shaking her head, but I even said that. All right. So right now we're almost the size that we need it to be. Trying to do is even out this swell and put a little bit of that swell onto the spine before we bring this down. So we're hammering on the inside of the handle, and what I'm doing is I'm not laying the knife flat on its spine. I'm not laying it flat like this. I'm laying it over here, and I'm bringing it up kind of at an angle like this. So whenever I hammer here, it brings this section up a little bit. And that's going to end up finishing our little swell that's on the spine when we start moving this down. And if you're wondering what I mean by swell, I'll show you on this one. So this has a swell right here, which means it bumps out. And then on the back side, you can see it kind of dips down right here and then has a swell going into the ricasso. So there's a bump out here and a bump out there. That's what I'm looking for. Kind of like this version of this profile, only difference is the back side's going to come out a little bit longer. This isn't going to come down as far. But you can see my hand fully goes inside there. So imagine this on a much smaller scale. Again, make sure you're still focused on your distal and planishing as you do this step. What's going to happen is, as you're forging on this edge here, going to start creating an I-beam. So this is it's going to mushroom out this way. So you got to forge that back down into the blade, because if you don't, you're going to risk folding it over onto the side, getting a cold shut. But you can see we're starting to get that swell on both sides now. We want to do this step before we rock it down. Vibrate down. I wonder if I can I'm not going to go grab it with that. Luckily, I have a whole bunch of other tongs that I can grab it with. Yoink. There we go. Don't pick up hot fire brick with your bare hands, because your hand will melt to it. So what you got going on, Nisha? Huh? Toby. Funny. I don't have any channel, only Instagram. So, yeah, definitely go follow him as well. Guess you should start making content, straight. Yeah, the ice pack's working like the champions. I'm on my 3rd bottle of water, guys. I don't know. All I know is I'm drinking waters that my wife made that are flavored. And I'm on my 3rd one. With how much I'm sweating, you gotta stay hydrated. That one's definitely a fruit punch. Fruit punch is one of my favorite things to drink. I love fruit punch. One of the things you want to do whenever you're creating a palm swell is you want to make sure that the swell is towards the middle of your hand, not too far forward. Flatten this out a little bit. We are pretty much perfect on the actual length for the inside of the handle. We got a nice even swell inside there. Now, one of the things you're going to see is as I've been putting it on the anvil here and hitting it here, we've been creating this 90-degree inner point here, which is one of the things that I really like, especially on one of my forged to finish knives. I like having that sharp angle there. It's just a personal preference. Now, it's going to get even crazier, but cleaned up a little bit as we start doing the next step. But that right there is starting to look like I want it to. So one of the things, like the profiles that I like for my knives to be, especially if they're going to be a kitchen knife or they're going to be a knife that I'm going to cut steaks with, I like for the cutting edge to not have a ton of sweep up. I like for the spine to drop down quite a bit and only have a little bit of rock on the actual cutting edge. So it's going to come down, the point's going to be pretty dropped, and then come back to the hill. It's a personal preference on knives that I make for pretty much any use. You can see here that cutting edge drops down quite a bit, cuts down quite a bit, or the spine comes down quite a bit to the tip, and then it has a nice subtle belly, versus this one where it barely comes down and the belly of the blade sweeps all the way up to the tip. I like that profile more for almost everything that I do. So that's what's going to happen with this particular blade. My sweat is dropping on the blade and just sizzling. So what I did whenever I was working on this section with the cutting edge hanging off the anvil over here is I was subtly rounding that transition so it's not as sharp. But that's looking good. All right. So this next little bit of forging, I'm going to go ahead and just fix a couple little things on the handle, and then I'm going to switch to the blade, and we're going to the cinder line tip. How you like the dog head? I love the dog head hammer. It's absolutely amazing. I'm horrible on Instagram. This is true. And yes, you should definitely join the Discord. First knife with a belt grinder. Nice. Making a knife in general is just awesome. So, for me, with the way that I do my blades, a lot of the times, you know, if I'm making knives for other people, I will bring that tip up a little bit more. But for me, I like to be able to barely rock my hand forward and have access to the tip. So if you want to use this tip, you got to put it to there. If you want to use this tip, you're pretty much already there. So that's the difference in the amount of rocking that you have to get to the tip. And I can just go whoop as opposed to whoop like that. I want to just be able to pull through. So that's the reason why I drop a lot of my tips down like that. That is a personal preference as a knife collector, as a person who was a knife collector before he was a knife maker. I would always look for blades like that. That would be my personal preference. I like sheep's foot or Warncliffe knives a lot. Whenever I first started making knives, I made a lot of Warncliffes. doing those glancing blows by hanging the end of the handle off a little bit and glancing blows off of it. We were at a straight angle before. Now we have a nice round angle with a nice angle here going into a nice sweep in here. That's because we both rounded this and moved that material down. That gives us a nice profile right there. By just glancing blows, going down, planishing. Like I said, you get that nice round profile right there. Cool little heel. And it doesn't have to be ground after it's done. You don't have to get on a 2x72 and grind in your profile. It's there. That is the profile. Good size there. Clean up a little bit. Still going to have to do a planishing phase. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and switch to holding it by the tang and working on that profile. I'm going to go ahead and grab it with my other tongs so that you can see what it looks like right now. Overall profile. So that's the overall profile right now. We're going to end up cleaning up this blade profile, getting everything where we want it to be before we do anything else. We're still okay when it comes to the actual the profile and how straight it is and stuff like that. It's not perfectly straight, but everything's looking good. You can see my plunge line all the way up here on there, so where the ricasso is and where the plunge comes up into the spine, that's that line right here. So we're going to keep that, and if you want to look at the other side, you should be able to see it right here. It kind of comes down right towards, let's see if I can get a nice little angle, but it's right there on that side as well, which is the reverse side. And remember, our handle is about 80% done right now. So we're still gonna do Eric's trucker pose for Instagram. No blade in the thing. What's up, Chris? How you doing? You gotta take a screenshot whenever I have the blade out here and we're hammering. What is your favorite profile? So, favorite profile is this one right here. Still haven't finished it because I really want to get the spend some time on it. That's my favorite profile of a knife right there. Whether it be this size of it or slightly smaller, like one of my EDC versions of this. But that is my favorite knife profile that I do. It's subtle, it's clean, it's useful. So if you want to see the EDC version of this, this is the camp knife version. The EDC size of this is this right here. So it's quite a bit smaller, but it just fits your hand comfortably. It's a nice, simple profile. But yes, that's spine to spine, so you can actually see how much bigger this knife is than this one. But that's my favorite profile. Woo! as I'm out here sweating up a storm. I wish that like an AC would make sense. There's something I don't get. So I've watched Trollski. If you don't know who Trollski is, he's a Polish knife maker. He's been doing YouTube since like YouTube started. He forges inside his workshop with like everything shut. I don't know if he's got like a crazy ventilation system or something that you can't see. But geez, I don't know how he does it. We're gonna grab these with the other tongs that are slightly smaller, still box shop. And what we're going to do is we're going to start cleaning up that profile. Forge that edge a little bit more. We want that edge to be nice and thin. One of the things you want to focus on whenever you're doing this is you want to be hammering in the same exact spot and moving your blade. That's going to help you stay nice and consistent with your thickness and everything. And one of the things that we're doing is when we're forging this, we have the blade slightly angled like that. So the spine's lifted up off the anvil. Whenever I'm forging in pretty hard on that cutting edge, I don't have the spine on the anvil. I've got it angled like that, and I'm coming in at an angle like this, and I'm pinching that cutting edge. I'm pinching it. I'm not forging it up into the spine yet. Whenever we get to that point, we will be laying the blade flat on the anvil, and we'll be coming in flat on the blade. But right now, when we're really fine-tuning that edge, we're just pinching it, and then we'll feather that up into the spine. Let's see here. Yes, I do. Gotta head inside. All right, Steve. Talk to you later. I sell my knives on the riversexperience.com. It's just like the channel name, The Rivers Experience, at just .com. So theriversexperience.com. I have a ton of knives on there for sale. I think I've got like 20 knives or something like that for sale. And feel free to scoop one up. I ship worldwide, doesn't matter where you're at. I've shipped to Belgium, I've shipped to Australia, I've shipped to Mexico, Canada, all kinds of different places. I ship worldwide, so don't worry about where you're buying it from. I'll figure out a way to get it there and make sure it makes it through customs the legit way. Keep working on that edge. The reason why I'm working on the edge right now, before I start working on this profile, is because I want it to stretch all the material however it's going to stretch, and then I'm just going to fine tune the tip. Because when you want the cutting or the tip to be pointed down, if you wait to do that and then you forge in your bevels, it's going to move that tip straight back up because you're stretching this material lengthwise whenever you're doing that. I've still got plenty of meat in the spine here, so as I forge the bevels up and forge in that distal, it's going to naturally pull this down. But we still want to make sure we have a nice point before we actually get to that point. Bevel point. Got to make sure the point looks like a point before we get to the point. We're making the point look like a point. And then we're dropping the point. So it looks like a better point. Yep, definitely go scoop up a shirt if you want to do that as well. So whenever I type out the website, I always do capital T, capital R, and capital E, So it actually says P with a capital T, Rivers with a capital R, and E on the experience. Because if I don't do that, the only thing that people see when they see my website is the word sex. I don't know what that says about them, but everybody points it out. So if I don't capitalize certain letters in it, their eyes just go straight to that. And I know that because they tell me about it all the time. All they see is sex experience. Start working on this profile. Remember, this is a forged to finish knife. So you're not going to be able to, or I'm not going to be able to go through and grind a whole lot of profile off of it. That's the whole point behind it being forged to finish. To get your hammer techniques down, work on forged to finish knives. I'm going to show you another trick here in a minute when we actually get to that step, but right now we're just focusing on cleaning it up a little bit just so I can make sure everything's looking good profile wise. No, one of the things that I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and finish forging from the cutting edge up to the spine. And one of the things that people want to focus on when you're doing a forge to finish is this transition from the ricasso up into what we would consider the flat. So whenever you're forging this section right here, you need to make sure that you are forging this ricasso up into the spine here, and that's a pretty level transition, so that whenever you forge up into the spine, it has a nice radius right here naturally. Hippie pop band. So that's one of the things that I'll do. And what that leads to is nice transitions whenever you look at it like, show you something here. So this is one of my Quakens that I did. You can see that hard center edge there for where this bevel and this bevel meet. So even though it's all forged and there's no grinding, you can get a crisp line just like that just during the forging process without having to grind anything, just by focusing on your planishing and being able to get everything nice and neat and clean. You can get, let's see, there you go. Nice, clean, symmetrical, nice beveled meeting line, all that stuff, all together there. And y'all get your minds out the gutter with the river sex experience. Jeez. And yes, that does sound like a hippie band. So all of y'all non-knife makers, are y'all enjoying watching this? all the non-knife makers get to live vicariously through me with their blacksmith dreams or bladesmith dreams. A lot of this is just fine-tuning. We don't need it to be super hot during this process. This is more or less a lot of planishing. What I'm doing here, as I'm moving it around, is I'm just working on this heel and those bevels there. You can kind of see it. Let me see how close I can get it up here. We're working on this profile that's right there where I'm going to grab one of the things that are not hot right now. So what I'm working on is this section right here where there's a taper that goes from the ricasso down to the cutting edge. Right there's a triangle that goes from across here to up here, then back down. That's the heel of the blade. We want to make sure that gets nice and centered. We want that nice taper as we go up to there. So that's what I'm working on. I'm just working on rounding this section in here, getting a nice plunge going down to that, getting a nice rounded heel on there. So basically what I'm doing is I'm coming in and I am forging in here and I'm rotating this as I need to pull it down into the heel, and I'm just rocking it, getting it nice and clean, making a nice smooth flowing transition. That's why I tell a lot of people, all you want to do is you keep your hammer in the same position and you move your blade. Treat yourself like a power hammer. Move your blade and get it to where you want it to go, as opposed to trying to move your hand and your arm and keeping the same angle of attack, I guess you could say. If you're doing this, I know that's exaggerated, but if you're doing that, it's very hard to keep a nice consistent angle. And if you're using the side of your hammer, the front of your hammer, this side of your hammer, the heel of your hammer, if you're using those pieces, you need to make sure you're hammering in the same spot. And you're moving your steel and treating yourself like a power hammer. It's going in the same exact spot. You're just moving the steel to be able to fine tune it. And doing that is going to make everything super consistent for you. This is the part where I have the bevels flat on my anvil and I'm hammering flat on it. So before, when I was pinching the edge, I had the edge on the anvil, but the spine lifted up, and I was hammering at an even angle. Now we're hammering flat and flat because we want to make the transition from the cutting edge to the spine one smooth bevel. So we're blending that cutting edge section that I forged up into the spine. That way we have nice clean bezels, which is really important for a forge to finish knife because I won't be grinding anything on this knife. I might clean up the profile like a 1/16 of an inch maybe, just to make sure that it's going to attach to a handle well. But you know what? Screw that. I'm not going to grind anything on this knife. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the handle scales slightly smaller than the actual tang. So the tang protrudes just a little bit. And I am not going to grind anything on this knife. The only thing that I'm going to do is sharpen it. That's the only thing that a grinder is going to touch is the cutting edge. I'm not going to grind it at all on the profile. So whatever I get done with at the end of this, that's the knife. Zero grinding. I got to make sure that tip looks absolutely fantastic. Make sure everything's planished perfectly. That is our blade profile. Now, of course, I'm not worried about this little bit of a hump right here because we haven't finished the handle profile just yet. So I'll mess with that whenever I'm messing with this. But that blade's pretty much good where it's at right there. It's not perfectly planished yet because we haven't done that yet. We're going to go ahead and get our handle finished the rest of the way. And then we'll planish that blade. Call it done. Now, one of the things that I might do tomorrow off camera is I might go in and with the ball peen hammer that Duck was talking about, just tuned in. Thank you, BD. What are those rods with your anvil? So all of these, all of that is my tongs. But with what I might do is I might go in and take my ball peen hammer and slightly radius the spine all the way down. So don't grind anything on it, but I'll take my ball peen and I'll sit there and I'll radius the spine and slightly bevel it. Just like I did with this right here. So how that's slightly rounded. And I even rounded the spine here. And that's all the hammer and the ball peen. And I'll go through and I'll radius that whole entire spine all the way around and make it super clean. Do y'all want to see, so do y'all want me to film a video where I do that so you can actually see that process? Or do you want me to take one of these live streams and take a blade that I've finished and radius it with the ball peen? It's not going to be super interesting for some people because they're not going to see the forge and all that stuff going, but you can actually see the parts of the anvil that I use whenever I radius it, so you can see what I'm talking about when I'm saying you don't need to grind. You can sit there and you can forge everything absolutely to the freaking just smallest detail, all with just hammers. Don't technically need to use grinders unless you want to sharpen it, but then again, you can always sharpen it with stones. So now we're going to finish working on this profile. Just a little bit. Don't need a lot of heat in it for this part. Right now I'm forging the flats of the blade up into the ricasso. That's going to finish my profile. I told y'all not to worry about that hump earlier. Now the only thing that I need to do at this point is I need to finish rocking this section right here down, and that's going to give me that full arc to the spine. As you see right now, this section is still kind of kicked up a little bit, and we still have plenty of height coming from our heel, so I can bring that down about almost half an inch and still be off of the, if I was on a cutting board or something like that. So all we're going to do when we do that is we're going to just kick this section down, and it's going to bring this kind of like into a hook right there. And so you can see it real quick. You see how we don't have that hump anymore? All I did was I used that material, I forged it up into where it was dented right here. I was able to move that material up into that spot by just forging it in, forging it back, forging it in, forging it back, and we were able to drop our tip down just a little bit more. So I stretched the material this way as opposed to all around everywhere. And all I was doing with that, I didn't need to switch to my straight peen, cross peen in order to make that happen. What I did was grab another piece of steel. What I was using was this to pinch it, just like a cross peen would be, and I was using the side as a straight peen. So I was able to move it wherever I wanted to, just like a piece of clay or something like that, and I was able to move it back, push it out, move it back, push it out, move it back, push it out, as I worked it, and that took that hump that was in there completely out by just a little bit of massaging. It's all just material management whenever you're doing this steps. Thank you, Danny. Thank you. Okay, that's pretty hot. So now what we're going to do is we're going to kick that heel down. Let's hang it off here. Brought that down just a little bit more. What I want to do now is I want to get rid of that little hump right there. You can barely see it, but it's right here. I want to get rid of that because I can't grind it away. So hang it off the anvil just a little bit. All right, bring it up here. Need to put it back in the forge for these particular steps. You can cold forge 80 CRV2 if you want to. All I'm trying to do is planish it. That's it. And I'm just smoothing it back in with planishing. So we're just getting rid of that bump right there, and I need to clean up just this little intersection right there. That is our handle profile. All cleaned up, full swell here, full swell on the back side, going up into that blade. Nice arch in the spine. Now we haven't planished yet, so we still need to planish, but that's a good looking intersection there. And I still need to planish it, but we've got our distal in here. Whenever I planish it, that's when we're going to fine tune it. We're going to fine tune it with a little bitty old hammer. But what I want to do, I want to planish the blade first, and then planish the handle into the blade. But I'm going to show y'all what it looks like right now. That's our profile. Nice cool looking handle profile. Drop down to the tip. Got a nice point forged in. Just an overall good profile. Now all we got to do is planish everything in line. So whenever you do a distal taper to the tip, when you do a distal taper to the tip and a distal taper through the tang, what ends up happening is your ricasso is the center of the seesaw, if that makes sense. I'll just bring y'all up just a smidge. There we go. That way I'm not kneeling down the entire time. I'm gonna move y'all back down when we start forging. So that ricasso turns into the center of the seesaw. And I'll show you an exaggerated version of it. So this right here, distal, distal. This is the center of that seesaw. So you have to get this piece right here pulled up to center. You got to get this piece here pulled up to center so that it's even on both sides. So when this is on a flat surface, whatever height you have there is the same height as you have there. Same thing to the center over here. Everything's even. This is how clean you can get stuff. That's just forged. Don't worry about that. That's a hammer mark on the spine. But how flat this is right here and how flat this is here, that's all forged. There's no grinding on that. That's all planishing, all forged, all the way down. So you can do pretty crazy work if you take the time to do it. All that means less time grinding, less material going into your water bucket. Now that I'm going to start planishing, I'm going to use basically just wolf jaw tongs, not the box jaw tongs. That's too hot. We need to let that cool down just a hair. We're going to be using this little bitty old hammer right here. Auto body hammer. It's about 26 years old. We're going to use it to clean everything up and even everything out. Whenever you're doing your planishing, you do not want a bunch of heat in there. Because what you're not trying to create a whole bunch of big dents. You're just trying to clean everything up. Trying to get that heel nice and centered in there. That cutting edge nice and straight. And the light kind of plays with it a little bit because you'll see light shining on either side of it. But right now we're just trying to get everything lined up, centered, and even. Blade's looking good. Now, of course, we haven't planished the handle into the blade. So it's not perfectly straight until we do this next step. I don't want to say perfectly straight. I want to say perfectly centered. Because if it was perfectly straight, it could be flat on one side and a mountain or a hill on the other. All right, Randy, it was awesome having you here. A lot of this is learning what to do with your material, managing it, things like that. Pull it all down just a little bit. So, working with your material, managing it, and being able to trust yourself to leave certain bits of material where it needs to be able to put it somewhere else later. So knowing that you want to leave a little bit of meat on the spine when you're forging your bevels so that you have a little bit to work with whenever you want to drop your tip down or something like that. Or knowing that whenever you forge in your bevels, after you do your preform, you start forging in your bevels, if it starts moving your tip up too much, just think about doing a little bit of a distal taper, and by default, when you thin out that spine, it will naturally bring that tip back down. So just know that you have that in your back pocket, that if your tip is going up too far, that you can distal taper the tang a little bit, or the spine a little bit, and it will bring that tip down just a hair. Or you can distal taper the heck out of it and bring that tip way down. So it's just understanding how that material moves, what you're going to do with it later down the road in your forging process will make your life a lot easier when you want to get into this. Again, when you watch a lot of YouTubers forge, most of the time there's no talking, it's just time lapse. Sometimes you need to be told the reason why I'm holding a hammer a certain way, the reason why I'm hammering a certain way, a certain hammer that I'm using, is so that you get to skip those steps in your learning process. And you're not having to pay $1,000 to go to somebody's shop to learn how to do it. All you got to do to be nice to me is maybe subscribe. Because if you're still watching at this point, you're not subscribed. It's crazy. The light is kind of glaring off this one section right here. But if you look at that, this is the heel. This is the heel of the blade. This is the butt of the knife going down the handle. I need to kick this blade over just a hair. right there. And that will be right in line. The blade up front here is just fine. I just need to bring that heel over just a hair. A little bit more. Over. The light's kind of playing with it a little bit. Yeah, the way that the light's hitting it is making takes forever to kill a battery when you're not using it for anything important. But as soon as you do a live stream, it just goes super fast. But I am happy with how this is. Nice and straight. Even and centered. Oh, we back. So everything's centered and even. I didn't really forge anything while I was doing this because I was too busy trying to find a cable to be able to charge the freaking phone. But yeah, we had overheat, we had battery die, all of that. But yes, that is our profile. We are, let's see, what's the easiest way to show? Yeah, so we are nice and centered through both distal tapers. So all that's looking good. Well, mule, this is what we were able to forge right here. We did a forge to finish all the way down to the cutting edge steak knife. Well, what I'm going to use is a steak knife. So I'm not going to be grinding anything on this. The only thing I'll be doing is sharpening it. And the handle that I'm going to put on it is going to be slightly smaller than the tang because I'm not going to be grinding any of the tang. What we forged is going to be what's left of the knife. And if y'all aren't following Mule, make sure y'all follow him as well. Another great, awesome person to follow. But that's a good looking profile. What I'll end up doing, like I said, is I will slightly bevel everything or radius everything with the ball peen. But everything's looking good. And what I might do is I might cold forge the edge a little bit thinner tomorrow. Because I think I want to bring this down to about a 1/16 of an inch. I mean, it's almost there right now. At least right at the heel and right at the tip. But I think I want to cold forge that cutting edge just a little bit more and thin it out just a little bit more before I go through and sharpen it. But that right there is the Rivers Experience steak knife. I wonder what the measurements are now. So let's see. We started with 5-inch overall length. We'll grab my small ruler. This is a small one. So we started with 5 inches of overall length. Remember how long I told you we'll probably get it to? We're at 9.5 inches. We're at 9.5 inches. Boom. So that's where I said we were going to get to. And that is where we got to. 9.5 inches. The inside of that handle is right at about 4 inches. The overall length on the handle is about 5 inches. So we started off with 3.5 inches and we got that handle all the way out to 5 inches. That ain't bad. That ain't bad at all. And then the height right at the heel, we're at 1 7/8 inches. So we went from 1 1/4 to 1 7/8 inches at the heel. That is going to be absolutely awesome. So now what I'm going to do, we're going to put it in the forge, let it start coming up the temp, and then we're going to anneal it. I like to anneal the projects after I get done forging them, just to take them back to a nice neutral state so that they're not all in that abused steel form. And plus, what a lot of people don't realize is things can air cool as you're actually forging them. So if you got to drill holes or something like that, you're going to end up having a pain in the butt when it comes time to drill everything. So it's always good to go ahead and anneal the steel before that. Turn this little light on here. So what we were able to do there was go through, do all the forging steps to be able to do a forge to finish steak knife. Now again, could this be like a little kitchen knife? Sure, but the handle profile is pretty aggressive for a kitchen knife with the way that it's shaped. But I think it's going to be really cool for a steak knife and something that I'm going to just, use to cut ridiculous steaks that I make. I was making a steak knife, and it is a version that I felt like making in a really hot shop. It's about 120 degrees in here. I have been dripping sweat the entire time, but it's been a blast. It's been fun doing this. We were able to do it in about 2 hours. That's with having issues and stuff like that with the phone. We probably would have finished this in about 1.5 hours if I wouldn't have done all that. And that's a complete forge to finish knife. That's not forging a rough profile and then going and grinding it out the rest of the way and taking 1/2 inch off of everywhere. That is forged to finish. The only thing that a grinder is going to touch is the cutting edge whenever I sharpen it. That's it. I'll have a drill press for drilling the holes in the tang and sharpening it. And I'll use a angle grinder with a wire wheel attachment to clean off forge scale and stuff like that. So the cool thing about stuff like this is whenever you leave the forge scale on during the forging process, so let's say you want to do a forge to finish knife, but you don't want huge dents in it. If you just leave the forge scale on there and then grind it off, you get a texture, a really cool texture like this right here, but it's only as thick as the forge scale. So it is, you can barely even catch your fingernail on it, yet you see its full profile on there of that forge scale. So it looks like it's super forged and like pitted and all that stuff, but really this stuff you can barely catch a fingernail on because it is so fine on there. If you're looking at it from this, you can't even really tell that there's dents on the side of it. And that's just because I leave the forge scale on during the forging process. We were still able to have that crisp of a line going all the way down it. Super crisp. There's not a bunch of dents going across there. super crisp, but still a lot of texture. And that's all because the only dents that we have are the forge scale, not hammer marks. Texas on it. So you think that's the opposite of what you want to do, but if you want a brute de forge finish without having all of the big hammer dents, because a lot of people, they call their brute de forge because they put so many hammer dents in it because they have crappy hammer control, or they don't want to planish, so they have all of these huge dents, and they're just like, well, I can't grind that out, so we're just going to call it a brute de forge knife. But if you take and you planish it real well with the forge scale on it, the dents are only forge scale deep. So you get all the cool texture and the topography of all of that without having super huge dents and gouges and all that crap in there. I don't like that. I'm not a big fan. If I'm trying to put a texture into a blade with hammer marks and all that stuff, I'll purposely do it. But if I'm trying to get a forge to finish chef's knife, I want those indentions to be very shallow. I don't want these huge things, these cavities that are going to just take food in with them or anything like that and be held to clean. I want very shallow texture, a lot of topographical action in there without having, let's see here. No, I just use yeah, and you could use one of those crazy brushes. I just don't use that whenever I'm trying to do a forge to finish or a brute to forge knife. Let's see here. Impossible to keep all the forge scale on some bits. Will come off at others. Yeah, you can do the water thing and blast it off. So for me, I'm not just telling you to do this because I feel like telling you to do it. I've done it this way with keeping the forge scale on for about, I don't know, 80 knives. So whenever I tell you that it works like that, as long as you're planishing real well, you know, a lot of the forge scale is going to come off. I've got forge scale on the ground all over the place. But as long as you're planishing it on a low heat and you're not sitting there beating the heck out of it, some of the forge scale is going to fly off and you're going to get another little forge scale indention, another little topographical, whatever you want to call that. But it's one of those things where I've done it so many times that I don't have to wire anything off. You know how many blades I have back there that are forged just the same exact way, cleaned up the exact same way. That one right there, it's got a lot of action, but those are very shallow. That's got a lot of action, but it's very shallow. And clean lines, you can see how crisp the lines are on the fuller, but very shallow. All that action, but very shallow. Proof's in the pudding, and I got a lot of pudding. There's some forge scale still on there, but all that action and everything is still really shallow. You can see how straight that is on the edge there, but there's all that texture. Boom. So fillet knives, I don't really do fillet knives. I do make a lot of bushcraft knives, camp knives, EDCs and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't really do a bunch of fillet knives. That's not my thing. I make beefy knives and stuff that you're gonna use and abuse. I don't really do a lot of, like, we don't eat fish at the house, so I have no real need to make one of those. And if I'm gonna make something initially, I'm going to make it for myself so that I can use it and abuse it and see how well I've made it. And if I'm not going to use that particular style of knife enough to be able to be my own focus group and make sure that I'm getting the right flexibility, that I'm getting it to the right thinness, that I'm getting the right profile and all that stuff, and be able to really use it and try it out, then I'm not going to make it. Because I don't want to make a knife and sell it to somebody and it not be tested to really be a useful knife. The dry spot on my shirt. That's funny. Fillet knives. Let's see here. Sound like it's going to be a super hard task. Seeing it needs to be able to bend around, but yeah. And you got to just be able to go through and make sure you have the right flexibility and everything, the right heat treat and temper and all that. Just getting started in forging. Welder by trade. Any information is good information. So, Doug, whenever you say like the forging on that, so I had a guy who's taught more people to make knives than I know who make knives. And whenever I was at the Texas Select show, at first I didn't get to talk to him because I was out talking to other people. He came by, and he's the one that taught Cowboy Zemansky how to forge and do all that stuff. And he was one of his teachers and a whole bunch of other people. And he came by the table and picked up that Quaken and was talking to Nisha about it and said that he knew less than 50 people that could forge to that cleanliness and that finish. Out of all the people that he knows, all the bladesmiths, all the knife makers, all the people that have been forging with him for the last 30 years, it's Lee. I can't remember his last name. Nisha might know it. And that was the Quaken. And whenever I told him how long I've been forging and everything, he was kind of surprised. But I was really proud of that, because for me, I still think I have way further to go within bladesmithing and blacksmithing. Let's turn this off. I feel like I still have way further to go within bladesmithing and blacksmithing, so I took that and was like super proud of it and everything. But he was talking about the fact that, yeah, he knows less than 50 people out of all the knife makers that he's taught and the people that he knows within the knife making community that could do what I did on that Quaken. That's pretty cool. I didn't think that, I just forged it during a live stream, and I was proud of that. So I'm not saying that I'm some forging guru, because I am absolutely not. But whenever I want to have that brute to forge texture, I purposely leave the forge scale on there so I get that texture without having all of the hammer marks. Because you'll see some people do brute to forge, and what they mean by that is they had their press and they use their drawing dies to draw the hill down. What's the guy, the other YouTube channel dude? J. Lee Knives. I love his knives, absolutely beautiful knives. But whenever he does a brute to forge, he leaves all of the press marks. So all of the marks from using the drawing dies, and he leaves all that on there, and then cleans everything up, and that's his brute to forge blade. I don't really like having all of the hammer marks unless I'm purposely trying to do that. Now, of course, that's his style, and it looks like his style and you could tell it's his knife. But for me, I am all about it looking like it has all the texture without it being super deep. It's just a personal preference. I was talking to a guy. If you look him up on Instagram, it's I think it's. I'll put it in the Discord. Seth Lopez. So Seth Lopez Knives, Seth Lopez, and I like how I spelled his first name and not his last name, Lopez. And I looked at his knives because he did forged S grinds on. He's done them on kukris and chef's knives and all that stuff. But where the S grind, which is a hollow to a flat cutting edge, he's forged those in. So that hollow, it looks like a hollow grind, is fully forged into the blade, and then it's flat on the outside of that. And again, it's all forging and everything like that. And what he does is the same thing. It's the forge skill, keeping that in the process, that makes that texture, not all of the hammer blows that make that texture. So you get this really cool looking texture without having all of the hammer blows. Again, it's my personal preference on that. I want everybody to make knives however they want to make knives. I like Jay Lee's knives, but I don't make them that way. Personal preference. Beside the point, guys, I think that's about it. That is annealing. I had it in there for probably too long, so I'll probably go through and anneal it one more time after this. After I do the cold forging tomorrow, I'll probably go through, heat it back up again, and call it good. Let it cool down. But guys, that's the end of this live stream. If you haven't joined the Discord, make sure you join the Discord. I've got it in all kinds of different places, and I think it's in the channel about thing. Join that, and I will go ahead and talk to y'all on that. But for now, let's go ahead and leave it here. It's been awesome. It's been cool talking to y'all. Thank you for subscribing, and I will catch y'all on Tuesday for the Shop Talk Tuesday, and then next weekend for the live stream. Catch y'all later. Hopefully you do, Mule. See you later, Danny. See you later, Duck. Catch y'all later.